On a 5-degree night in the middle of January, most of us are asleep under a heavy blanket. But on a gravel lot in Eugene, Oregon, a man in his 60s is also asleep, and he is warm too. His entire home is a curved wooden shell shaped like a barrel cut in half, and it costs $3,000 to build. It has a locking door and walls thick enough that his own body heats it. A few years ago, this same man was sleeping under a bridge. So how does a home that costs less than a used lawn tractor carry a person through a freezing winter? To understand why these little barrel homes matter, you first have to understand what winter actually does to a person who has nowhere to go. Every year in the United States, hundreds of people without housing die from the cold. Some freeze on park benches. Some are found in doorways in the morning by shop owners opening up. And you do not need Arctic weather to die of hypothermia. A wet sleeping bag and a 40-degree night can be enough. When the body's core temperature drops just a few degrees, the shivering starts. Drop a few more, and the shivering stops, which sounds like relief, but is actually the danger sign. The mind gets foggy. Some people become strangely calm. Paramedics who work winter shifts in cold cities will tell you that the people they lose are rarely lost in blizzards. They are lost on ordinary cold nights, in the rain, in clothes that never dried out. For someone sleeping outside, winter is not one emergency. It is 90 emergencies in a row, one for every night between December and March. And that is the problem the barrel home was built to solve. So what is a barrel home, exactly? The official name for the most famous version is the Conestoga hut, named after the covered wagons that crossed the American prairie, because it has the same silhouette. Picture a sturdy wooden platform raised off the wet ground on blocks. On top of that platform, builders bend a series of curved ribs from one side to the other, like the hoops of a wagon. Over those ribs goes a thick layer of rigid foam insulation, and over the foam goes a tough waterproof skin, usually corrugated metal or heavy vinyl. At one end, there is a real framed wall with a real door, a deadbolt, and a small window. Inside, there is room for a bed, some shelves, and a person's belongings. That is the whole structure. No plumbing, no kitchen, no bathroom. Those are shared in a central building nearby. Volunteers in Eugene, Oregon have been building these huts for years through a group called Community Supported Shelters, and a crew of ordinary people, retirees, church groups, high school students, can put one together in a couple of weekends. Now let's talk about that $3,000 price tag, because it is not an accident. It is the entire point. The curve of the barrel is the secret. A rectangular shed needs a framed roof, trusses, shingles, gutters, and a lot of skilled labor. A curved shell needs none of that. Rain and snow slide right off the arch, the same way they slide off a wagon canopy, so there is no flat roof to leak and no snow load to collapse it. The materials list reads like a single trip to a hardware store. Sheets of plywood for the platform, foam board for insulation, a roll of metal or vinyl for the skin, a door, a window, some screws, and paint. When volunteers donate the labor, the cash cost lands right around $2,500 to $3,000 per hut. Compare that to a small conventional tiny home, which can easily run $30,000 to $50,000, and you begin to see why cities struggling with homelessness started paying attention to a design borrowed from the 1800s. But the price is only half of it. The heat is where the engineering gets genuinely clever, because most of these huts have no furnace at all. A resting human body gives off roughly the same heat as a 100-watt light bulb, constantly all night long. In a tent, that heat escapes through thin nylon in seconds. In a barrel hut, that same heat gets trapped by inches of foam insulation wrapped around a very small airspace, and the temperature inside begins to climb. Residents say that on a 20-degree night, body heat alone can keep the inside of a sealed hut 30 degrees warmer than the air outside. Add a small, safe electric heater, the kind that shuts off if it tips over, running off a modest solar setup or a shared power line, and the inside becomes genuinely comfortable. Some residents warm a few jugs of water in the community kitchen before bed and tuck them under their blankets, where they radiate heat for hours like old-fashioned bed warmers. The shape helps too. A curved ceiling has less surface area than a boxy room, so there are fewer places for warmth to escape. One woman living in a hut village told a local reporter that her first night inside, she woke up sweating in February, and she cried because she could not remember the last time she had been too warm. These huts did not stay an Oregon experiment. Versions of the same idea are now scattered across the world, and some of them look like science fiction. In the German city of Ulm, engineers built something called the Ulmer Nest, a sleek, windowless sleeping pod made of wood and steel that sits in public parks. It looks a little like a giant capsule. A person can climb in on a freezing night, close the hatch against the wind, and sleep protected from the weather, and a sensor quietly notifies social workers that someone is inside so they can check on them in the morning. In Paris, a young engineer designed the Igloo, a lightweight shelter made of foam insulation wrapped in aluminum, which volunteers hand out directly to people sleeping on the street. It folds out like a little igloo on the pavement, and the inside can be 25 to 30 degrees warmer than the winter air from body heat alone. And back in Eugene, the huts grew into something bigger, places like Opportunity Village, where dozens of tiny structures sit in neat rows around shared kitchens, bathrooms, and gathering spaces, with gardens in the summer and strings of lights in the winter. Different countries, different designs, same idea. Get a wall, a roof, and a locked door between a human being and the cold, as cheaply and as fast as possible. And it is worth pausing on what daily life in one of these villages actually looks like, because it is nothing like the encampments people usually picture. Opportunity Village in Eugene is self-governed. The residents themselves hold weekly meetings around a long table in the community yurt, vote on the rules, and enforce them. No violence, no stealing, no drugs on the property, and everyone contributes a few hours of work each week, cleaning the shared bathrooms, staffing the front gate, tending the vegetable garden, shoveling snow off the walkways. New residents are interviewed and voted in by their future neighbors. Break the rules, and those same neighbors vote you out. Visitors often say the place feels less like a camp and more like a tidy little campground with a waiting list, and there usually is a waiting list, sometimes months long. Retired teachers live there, former truck drivers, grandmothers who lost a husband and then a house in the same terrible year. One village manager put it simply, people do not just need shelter from the weather, they need to matter to somebody again, and a village gives them both. Nobody drives past this gravel lot on purpose. The strings of holiday lights the residents hang between the huts every December are for each other. So what is it actually like to spend a freezing night inside one of these barrel homes? Residents describe an evening routine that would look familiar to anyone who has ever gone winter camping. Around sunset, the village gets busy. People head to the shared kitchen to cook something hot, because a warm meal is fuel, and the body burns that fuel as heat all night. They fill water bottles with hot water. They visit the bathroom building one last time, because leaving a warm hut at 3 in the morning is misery. Then the door closes, and the deadbolt turns. Inside, the bed is built in layers. A foam pad against the platform, because the cold below steals more heat than the air above. Then blankets, then a sleeping bag, then more blankets on top. People sleep in a knit hat, because so much heat leaves through the head. By midnight, the little space is warm enough that some crack the window an inch, which sounds crazy, but there is a reason. One sleeping person exhales about a liter of water into the air overnight, and in a sealed, insulated box, that moisture condenses on the cold walls by morning. A little airflow keeps the bedding dry. And dry, as we are about to see, is everything. Before we go any further, I want to pause for a moment, because I know that for some of you watching, this story is not just interesting, it is personal. Maybe you love someone who is already out there. Maybe money is disappearing faster than it comes in, and you are one bad month away from losing the place you live. While researching this video, we gathered far more survival strategies than we could ever fit into one video, the kind of specific, practical detail that usually gets cut. So we put all of it into a guide called The Veteran's Blueprint. You will find the link in the description below this video. If you are struggling or you are trying to help someone who is, it is there for you. Now back to the villages, because the residents there live by a set of unwritten rules that explain how they make it to spring. Rule number 1, and every veteran of the streets will tell you the same thing. Cold does not kill you. Wet kills you. A person in dry clothes can sit through a 15-degree night wrapped in blankets and see the sunrise. A person in damp clothes can slip into hypothermia at 45 degrees, so life in winter revolves around moisture. Wet socks come off immediately, no matter how tired you are. Boots are never worn to bed because feet sweat and sweat is water. Damp clothing gets hung near the ceiling of the hut, where the rising warm air dries it by morning. Rule number 2 is layers, not thickness. 3 thin shirts trap warm air between them and beat 1 heavy coat. And cotton is avoided in winter because once cotton gets wet, it stays wet and pulls heat out of the body for hours. Wool keeps warming even when damp, which is why donated wool sweaters and army surplus blankets are treated like gold in these villages. Rule number 3, insulate below before you insulate above. New residents pile blankets on top of themselves and shiver anyway, until a neighbor explains that the platform under them is drinking their heat, and that the answer is foam, cardboard, anything underneath the body first. Small rules, learned the hard way. And in a barrel hut, they are the difference between a rough winter and a survivable one. Every few winters, the design gets a real test, and so far the little barrels have passed. During one Pacific Northwest ice storm, freezing rain coated Eugene in a shell of ice, snapped tree limbs across the city, and knocked out power to tens of thousands of homes. Families in ordinary houses with electric heat woke up to indoor temperatures in the 40s and fled to hotels. In the hut villages, residents did what they always do. They sealed their doors, layered their bedding, and let insulation and body heat do the work, and the huts held. The curved roofs shed the ice instead of collecting it. Neighbors checked on neighbors, knocking on doors down the row, the way people used to on old farm roads. The community building ran a propane stove, and residents took turns carrying hot soup and hot water bottles to the older folks who could not manage the icy paths. When the power came back days later, more than one resident joked that for once they had been warmer than the people in real houses. There is something almost poetic in that. A shelter designed for the most vulnerable people in the city turned out to be one of the most storm-proof structures in it, precisely because it was never allowed to depend on anything that could fail. Now, let's talk about the part of this story that convinced skeptical city councils, and it was not compassion. It was arithmetic. When a person lives outside through a winter, the public pays for it whether we notice or not. One ambulance ride and an emergency room visit for hypothermia or frostbite can cost thousands of dollars. A single night in jail costs a city far more than a night in a shelter. Researchers who followed people living on the street found that between hospitals, police contact, and emergency services, one person could cost the public tens of thousands of dollars a year, while producing nothing but suffering. A Conestoga hut costs about $3,000 once, lasts for years, and can be built by volunteers in 2 weekends. Even adding the shared bathrooms, the site management, and the utilities, a hut village shelters a person for a tiny fraction of what a traditional shelter bed costs to operate. And residents actually stay, because unlike a crowded shelter dormitory, a hut has a door that locks. For a lot of people, especially older women and veterans, that lock is the entire decision. They will refuse a shelter cot in a room full of strangers and accept a barrel hut in a heartbeat, because for the first time in years, they can sleep without keeping one eye open. Of course, honesty matters here, and the honest truth is that a barrel home does not fix homelessness. It has no shower, no kitchen, no bathroom of its own. It does not cure an illness, erase a debt, or rewind the divorce, the layoff, or the medical bill that put someone outside in the first place. Critics say these villages risk becoming permanent camps, and that only real apartments end homelessness. And there is truth in that. But the people who run these villages describe the hut as a first solid step, because it turns out it is almost impossible to rebuild a life while you are in survival mode. You cannot show up to a job interview when you were awake all night guarding your belongings. You cannot keep medications that freeze or paperwork that soaks through in the rain. Give a person a warm, lockable space, and the survival alarm in their brain finally quiets down. Caseworkers in Eugene say that once people stabilize in the huts, many reconnect with family, start treatment, find work, and move into permanent housing at rates that crowded emergency shelters rarely see. The barrel does not end the story. It just gives the story somewhere safe to begin again. And if you are watching this from a warm living room and wondering what any of this has to do with you, the answer is more than you might think, because these villages run almost entirely on ordinary people. The huts are built by volunteers holding drills and paintbrushes, many of them retirees who wanted their weekends to mean something. The wool blankets, the winter coats, the canned food in the community pantry, nearly all of it walks in the front gate in the arms of neighbors. Churches sponsor individual huts, and some families do too, covering the $3,000 in memory of a parent or a son, with a small painted plaque by the door. Villagers say the donations that matter most are the unglamorous ones. Warm socks, because socks wear out fastest of anything, hand warmers, batteries, rain gear, rides to medical appointments, and time, honestly, just time, because a person can go weeks on the street without anyone using their name, and a volunteer who shows up every Tuesday to play cards in the community room can do things for a human being that no building ever will. Several villages started because one determined person, often a grandmother with a stubborn streak, refused to stop calling the city council, which means the next one could start anywhere, even where you live. There is one image from Eugene that stays with you. On a snowy December evening, an older resident stood outside her hut, watching the flakes settle on the curved metal roof, and she said the sound of snow hitting the roof used to be the most frightening sound in her world. Now it is just weather. That is what $3,000 bought. It was never luxury, and honestly, not even comfort. Just the oldest human privilege there is, the one most of us stopped noticing a long time ago. The privilege of hearing a storm from the inside. This winter, in gravel lots and city parks from Oregon to Germany to the streets of Paris, thousands of people will sleep through freezing nights inside little wooden barrels, warmed mostly by their own hearts beating. And every one of those small curved roofs is quietly making the same argument, that the distance between despair and dignity can be as short as one locked door. If this story moved you, there is a video on your screen right now about the tiny home villages built just for homeless veterans and how they got their second chance. It picks up exactly where this one leaves off.